Hour, and we are off and running for this 23rd of June 2020, and we're seeing a brand new you. We're seeing it's
It's a
it's
little
actually
closer.
it's doing wonders for your complexion, I must say. It's
Oh, is that right? Do I
yeah,
look fresh-faced
it's
and
it's like
yep.
the old the old Golden
Oh
Girls
God,
episode.
look at this.
Did you ever see
Yeah.
the Did you ever see the old Golden Girls episode where they're all lying down because all the gravity is pulling everything back? So they spend an hour in the living room with drinks, lying, staring at the ceiling. I don't know why I
And
remember
having
that.
Rue McClanahan having her jowls come down.
That's
My
right. Yeah,
goodness. Well,
they're all
that's
gone now,
certainly
aren't
a
they?
picture you. No, Betty White is
Oh,
still
that's right.
very
Betty
much
White is
around,
still with
young
us.
man.
God,
Uh,
strike me down for even suggesting
Estelle
that.
Getty, who always played the mother, who I never thought was very good,
Was
she was
younger.
actually younger
Yeah,
than certainly younger than Betty White. Yeah,
right. So interesting. I don't know why I went there this morning,
yeah,
but so anyway, we are evolving technologically, and you can hear
yeah.
yourself now, and you can
I
see
may have to
yourself.
put the tripod up a little higher so I can look right at the camera
That's right.
rather than at the
But
screen. But
but it's
we can
better.
figure
It's
this out.
better now than it was because you are certainly more in line with the camera than you were.
Yeah, yeah,
Because a lot of people tend to, again, it's normal. You tend to
yeah.
do this or look at the screen, and as opposed to be
Of
looking
course,
at the
I tend
person.
to do this.
Yes.
I lose my. I'm Tommy. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And you're
Rachel,
well this morning.
I'm fine. I've been up since very early. I did two other video conferences with clients before you and I connected, but I'm pleased that all of these
Good
technical
Lord.
things that you and I have been talking about are coming together. And
Yeah.
so
You told me to reboot and then you rebooted it. I thought I had when you
that's
told me
fine.
because
That's
I
fine.
okay. Anyway,
I was
because you did some tinkering,
I
did
did
you?
some tinkering, but I can see you and I can hear you, so we're off to a good start. And so
Okay.
Rachel Kiddell-Monroe is our guest. She's in the green room right now. Perhaps you can tell me a bit about her, how you know her.
Oh, she is a neighbor of mine, and they moved back they were down in, I believe it was Central America, and she is from England, and her mom is French, from France, and they are neighbors of ours. While doing all this advocacy work that she does, I guess, Lawyers Sans Frontières
Well,
and things like
she used to
that.
be with Médecins Sans. Is she a physician?
Medicine, no, she's trained as while she was doing all this, she went out and got her law degree. This is a
Yeah,
mother of
you
three
see.
boys,
Okay, this
and
is
she
what you
just,
and I do. We invite these people on here, and we look like just a couple of old farts waiting for UPS to show up, and that's it.
yeah,
There's nothing,
yeah, and
so
yeah, and Rachel gets out there and does stuff, and she
that's right.
started this organization, or was called onto it, called SeeChange,
SeeChange,
which deals,
SEE.
yeah,
Right.
dealing with indigenous communities up north. She's made many trips up north, far more than a lot of native Canadians. I mean,
Okay. Let me just
Canadian,
bring her in
European.
here and we can talk
Yeah.
to her, and she's standing by. And
Good morning, Rachel.
there she is.
How
We're
are
all
you?
set. Fine. I hear you called Yvonne about 7 o'clock this morning. You're
That's
ready,
fine.
raring to go.
Yeah.
No, that's
I'm a
fine.
very organized because I've had so many Zooms where the thing is all wrong and then it all ends up late and
I like
Oh,
efficient people. That's
yeah.
very good. Excellent. Outstanding.
Well,
Thank you very much
Rachel,
for joining
actually,
us, Rachel.
I don't need to hear Rachel with my headset. She's right next door. I can
yeah,
hear her
Okay.
that's
through the
right.
back of
Yeah.
the.
I could even wave to you out of the
Yes,
window.
we can. We got to do some watering today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's particularly hot today.
Oh, well, maybe you'd like to be up north
Yeah,
these days.
yeah.
Well, I don't
When
know
was the
about
last
that.
time you were up north?
It's lots of mosquitoes now up north though, isn't
Yeah.
it?
This is
Yes.
true.
I prefer
We
Yeah.
to be here in the heat, I think.
we were just talking about you, Rachel,
How
and
are you?
introducing you a bit. You are not a physician, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm a lawyer.
A lawyer. Okay. But you
Hmm.
worked with Médecins Sans Frontières, did you not?
Yes, about half of the people who work with MSF are not doctors or
Okay.
nurses or
All
medical
right.
practitioners.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Rachel got her
Takes
law
a village.
degree in the last couple of years, right, Rachel? You went back
Well,
to
I got my
Yale
law
and
degree in the UK many, many years ago. I took my Masters of Law here in bioethics and
oh,
law a few
it was
years
the
ago.
master's. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you worked with
What got you in?
MSF. I'm sorry, David, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, you
Go
worked
ahead.
with MSF in the UK, did you?
No, I set up the office in the UK,
Okay.
actually. I was the founder of the office there, but I started working with the Dutch because at that time there were only offices in 4 or 5 countries in Europe. It was a long time ago when MSF was very, very small, tiny little organization, not the megalith it is now.
Did you work in Central America for a while?
I did.
And,
I lived in
what were
Costa
you doing?
Rica for 5. I lived in Costa Rica for 4 years, and I was working doing all the regional humanitarian affairs work for Latin America and the Caribbean. So I traveled.
It was fascinating. And then you moved here to Montreal.
2004.
2004.
Gosh, has it been that long? You've been here
Yeah,
16
it's been
years.
that long.
Good neighbors. So how did you get involved with SeeChange? Tell us about that.
SeeChange, I decided after several years of being in very policy kind of positions, very floating high above, I was really missing that connection with humans, with people and issues and getting my hands on. I'm very much a practical person, and that's where my heart is really, with people. So I've been looking around for a while, but you know, Canada, you feel it's pretty much covered. We've got a wonderful health system, you know, it's a very equal society, more or less. You know, you feel like everything is covered, lots of wonderful organizations helping people in difficult situations. And then I heard about this tuberculosis crisis amongst the Inuit, and that woke me out of my stupor. And so I said, that's it, I'm going to do something on that. And it's finally my chance to do something here in Canada.
300 times higher incident rate than in the general population.
Exactly.
300 times.
It's huge.
And in the general population, most of us think that tuberculosis is a disease that was stamped out mid last century, right? And
well, absolutely. We very much associate it, you know, with the words consumption, the Victorian era. We don't even get vaccines for tuberculosis anymore. But they do in Nunavut and in the Inuit populations, they do get BCG still, because it's so prevalent.
How long have you been working on the TB file there?
So now it's, I really started looking into it in about the end of 2017. And then we started working up there in the beginning of 2019. That was when we got our first start.
Tell me about your first trip up, where you went, and what your first impressions were, good and bad.
So we first went in May 2018. It was really, I didn't expect to love it so much as I did. I'm not a cold weather person. Canada is not a natural place for me, as you know, I'm English, and we don't quite have the winters we have here. So I wasn't expecting particularly to I always go down towards tropical areas. All my work has been in tropical areas. So I was actually blown away by how at home I felt there, and how much I enjoyed the snow, the ice, the wilderness, but most of all, how much I enjoyed the people. The Inuit are really quite extraordinary. They have a huge energy. They're not easy to get to know at first, but once you start talking, it's this incredible sense of humor, a lot of laughter, a lot of jokes, very warm and very welcoming. And especially once you start to go there more times. I've been there now 7 or 8 times, and I literally come to the airport and people come to meet me, and I feel like I'm kind of
that's lovely.
A community that I feel at home in.
Which communities in particular? Where were
I went
you?
to Clyde River and Kiddell-Monroe, so they're both on Baffin Island. Communities, Kiddell-Monroe is around 700 people, and Clyde River is 1,200 people. So the bad side, you asked the good and the bad. The good was, you know, that the bad side was really seeing the kind of conditions that people are living in. I mean, it's abject. The houses are prefab houses, and you have to realize the temperatures can go down to -55 on a really, really tough winter day. So the houses inside have to be superheated. So it's not a healthy environment. Lots of overcrowding, many families in houses squashed together, small houses. And just the idea that people are living in plywood houses in the Arctic, in Canada, is just astounding to me. There are many stories of the houses being dilapidated, of bad air circulation, 4 or 5 people sleeping in the same room together. So you can imagine how infectious diseases like tuberculosis become really easy to transmit and also very difficult to stop, because TB is an airborne disease like COVID. We all know about COVID now. So tuberculosis is very similar, not as infectious, but it passes through droplets in the air. So if you inhale it, you can become sick.
And once
What
that fire's
precautions
been
do you
set,
take?
it's been
Yeah.
set, right?
And it's
Has
very
there,
difficult to
has there
eliminate.
been any progress made in the last 2 or 3 years?
It's very hard to say. I mean, this is a problem, as the head of the indigenous, homeland likes to say, this is a very, very old problem, and we're coming very late to try to resolve
Right.
it. It's been going on for 80, 90, 100 years. We keep trying, Einstein said, the definition of madness is to keep trying to do the same thing, deal with the same problem the same way. And that's what we've been doing with TB. It's always trying to go with the same solution. So in 2 or 3 years, no, I can't say we've seen improvements or not. The goal is to eliminate TB by 2030. That's the goal of the federal government and the Nunavut territory. It's going to be ambitious if we don't get a move on. And that's why we're trying to bring this different community-based approach.
Now you have COVID to deal with now too. There's a community first COVID-19 roadmap you talk about, I've seen. What is that?
We created that for the Clyde River community, who phoned us up and said, what do we do now we've got COVID? We don't know how to organize ourselves. And they were in a panic. Rightfully so, because we know that these kind of diseases can wipe out indigenous communities. And if you look at what's happening in the Amazon today in Brazil with the indigenous communities there, it's horrific. And so they wanted to have a way to protect themselves. So we created this plan, like an emergency plan of all the different steps that you need to take from beginning to end. So how you organize yourself, how you prepare for cases, and then how to respond if you get cases. And so we walked them through this. They created their own emergency plan. They created an emergency committee. And then we hired some staff in Clyde River who could be running around doing logistics. And a lot of it in the beginning was, delivering food baskets for the elders who couldn't leave their homes, being able to create activities for the children who were staying in the home all day. And one of the big successes was a mask making competition, because already in March, we realized that masks were going to be one of the key ways to prevent the spread of COVID. And so all the community members made their own beautiful, amazing sewers, the Inuit. They made the most beautiful face masks, the children, so everyone has them. So all these things at the beginning. And that roadmap, then they said, well, surely there must be other communities who need this as well. And so we decided to put it onto a website, and now we're spreading that around, and it's being used in Mexico, starting to be used in Brazil, in Colombia. It's gradually spreading around.
What about the fact that TB, as you say, is airborne and it's respiratory, as is COVID-19? So you've got entire communities with pre-existing conditions, the way you would have the older population down here being more susceptible, right, to begin with. You must have had a strange feeling when you heard about COVID hitting.
I mean, it was fear, pure fear, because we know that many of the, what they call comorbidities, or the other diseases that you can have alongside, those diseases, diabetes, hypertension, heart problems, anything that's in your lungs, so tuberculosis included, these are diseases that can mean that you are more susceptible to getting seriously ill with COVID. Not that you're more susceptible to get it necessarily, but more to the serious form of it. It's still not clear. I mean, the science, has not been very consistent over the past 6 months, but that's a little bit where we are. So that's why there was a lot of fear in the community. What is clear is diabetes is a very strong comorbidity, a very influential comorbidity, and there's a lot of that in the communities, and you find that a lot in many indigenous communities because of their dependence on food coming from outside the territory. So in Nunavut, I mean, they rely on food coming from the south, being sent up in sea lifts, and they have one store in the community where they all go and buy their food, the North Mart. And then, you've got lots of different food choices, very few vegetables and fresh foods, and a lot of canned and other foods. So of course that creates health issues as well.
And there are, on top of everything else, there are social problems in remote communities that complicated even more, from the young to the
Well,
old.
there's addiction, alcoholism, a host of other difficulties that all circulate around these causes that you're seeking to attend to.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to remember the trauma that these communities have lived through. And I think whenever we talk about the present day and alcoholism and so on, we have to think back in the history. People in many of these communities, I can only talk about Clyde River because that's the community I really work in. They have suffered residential schools. They have suffered from being removed forcibly from their communities during the 1950s when the federal government sent up the CD Howe to pick people up to bring them south for treatment. They were terribly mistreated in those TB sanatoriums in the south, whether they were in Ontario, Hamilton, and other places. And so this trauma lives through and is passed on transgenerationally. So that is one of the reasons that there are a lot of mental health issues, if you want to put it like that, that then result in things like addiction and so on. And I think that one of the other issues is that those has never really been dealt with. It's never really been taken that seriously. The health system in these communities is extraordinarily weak. You have one health post with extremely dedicated nurses who are trying really to do their best, but they're working 7 days per week. They're on call 24 hours a day, and they have very limited medical capacity. So it's very difficult for them to really respond to the needs of the community, which are so great, as you say, Yvonne.
I'm struck by that phrase that you just used. It just hit me like a brick. The trauma is being passed down. So
I've got a beautiful example, if I could tell you that.
Please.
We had a workshop at the beginning of the year, our first tuberculosis workshop. And the workshop was a 1-week workshop with Ilasatsevic, which is this extraordinary Inuit-led organization that works in the Clyde River community and beyond. And the workshop was based on the idea of addressing trauma, and through addressing trauma, we would then be able to talk about the technical issues of TB and pass on the knowledge. We had 9 elders in that workshop. We spent probably 70% of the time talking about their stories from when they were taken down to the sanatorium. Some of them had never told those stories before, ever, and had seen how their whole lives had been shaped by what happened to them in those sanatoriums. And so they found the apology of Trudeau, which had come out probably about 2 months before I was there, so empty, because they said, well, he didn't even come and see us. He goes to Iqaluit, didn't come and see us. We want to hear from the people who actually harmed us in those sanatoriums. What happens to them? Where's the justice to those people who beat me or who, you know, did false experiments on me? And because they talk about many of these things. What was extraordinary is they said, but that apology was directed to the wrong people. They apologized to us, the elders, but who we should all be apologizing to is the new generation, because they're the ones who are having to live the results of our trauma today, whether they're little at 5 or 6 years old, whether they're the 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They're living the results of what we lived through in the 1950s. So it was really extremely powerful.
And there are communities like this, Rachel, dotting northern Canada, right? There are a whole bunch of 1,200, 700 people communities going through the same complicated, ugly little trauma.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they're living it there. When we talk about the Inuit, I mean, they're spread across 4 provinces and territories. And, you know, some of the rates of TB are much worse when you go over to Labrador. The communities are much less people there, but the rates are absolutely terrible. In Quebec, in Nunavik, the rates of tuberculosis are astounding, and the poverty that people are living in is when it's criminal. It borders on criminality that we have. You know, look at me and how I'm living here in the south, and I know that people, you know, just a few thousand kilometers north of me are living in that way. It needs to change.
You're a professional. You're a parent. How do you parse all of this in your own self? How do you deal with this inside Rachel?
I think the only way that I can do the work that I feel is my vocation to do is by doing it with joy and with positive energy. Because if I fall into the misery, if I fall into the sadness or the depression from what I see, I can't help anybody. That's one side. But the more important side is from the people, the way that people receive me when I'm coming to bring what little I can bring, the sense of family that I get, the sense of connection, the sense of community, the sense of humanity, of solidarity. I find that so enriching for my own life that I can only feel completely fortunate and blessed that I can actually go and do this work, and that this is what I'm doing, and I managed to find a way through. So, and my family get a lot of vicarious benefit from it as well, from the people that they meet, from the people that come to our house and share their experiences from their capacity to go and live and visit these places as well. You know, they've been up to the Cree land with my husband to visit, so that they really understand and feel this is part of their lives too. So it makes their lives richer and yeah.
Yeah. And knowing you as I do, as a friend and a neighbor, yeah, I think you couldn't not do this.
No.
Right?
No. I mean, you know, I finished on a very high-powered job, very exhausting, and afterwards it's like, everyone said, well, why don't you take a rest now? And I'm like, well, but there's just so much to do. So I you know, it keeps me going. I couldn't function just sitting.
Is there anything the average Mokes can do to help SeeChange?
Well, we can support SeeChange.
Okay.
I mean, you know, small NGOs, it's always a big challenge trying to get funding to be able to work in these places. Nunavut is an extra. Someone said to me, I think it must be the most expensive air miles in the world to get to Nunavut. I mean,
I've been to Iqaluit a couple of times, and yes, it's another planet. It's another world, for better and for worse, unfortunately.
But Rachel, one of the things seems so logical because of the tuberculosis spread. Why has the government here not spent a ton of money building proper housing?
But that's the question
about
that people have been asking for decades, David.
Decades. I don't think it's too dramatic to say it's a national disgrace. But I mean, if people are not going to contract tuberculosis, let alone pass it on, you've got to have proper housing. Where's the Canadian government?
I am completely baffled by it, Dave. I have no idea why we can't just give people proper housing. I just don't get it. People keep
the nice
Canadians, so expensive. You know? I know. You know, it's true that it's expensive to build a house up north because you have to go on the sea lift and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, but there's
only 34,000 people up there. I mean, but you know, that's the excuse you hear, though, Yvonne.
I know, but we've been talking. We've been talking about racism and racial issues the last few weeks and months. This is racism too. This is violence as well, in my opinion. This is violence against the people.
Absolutely.
Is what it is. Yeah.
I mean, we have to really, you know, we talk a lot about colonialism in the north and the leftovers colonialism. So I think we should just call it what it is. It's just racism.
Yep.
Systemic racism.
Systemic racism. There's no other word for it. And it's. I think we live so much in our white privilege and we feel like we're doing so much to help. But in fact, everything that we do is, so many things that we do are counter. It's very interesting when I'm in the community because I get pulled up on so many things that I say that I don't even realize, you know, that are not the right thing to say. So the thing about addiction and alcoholism, Inuit people are so sick of people thinking of them as people with alcohol addictions and drug addicts and committing suicide. They want to be considered to be people who have lives, and the reason that they're going through many of these things is because of what has happened to them, because of the systemic racism that they're living in. And I mean, I would be taking to the bottle if I'd had to live through even 100th of the trauma that these people have lived through. So we really have to change the framing about the way we talk about our Indigenous peoples here, about the Indigenous peoples here in Canada, how we discuss their issues, and how we bring much more honor and dignity to the way that we talk about them. So I want to tell stories that are empowering. stories of people who have done amazing things, like our TB coordinator in Clyde River, who's absolutely changing the way that people think about TB. Rather than people being scared of TB, in just 6 months, she's converted it so that people now are like not scared and are really like, how are we going to fight TB? How she's been able to bring her community to a place where everyone is proudly walking around with their homemade masks to fight against COVID. And that was not because the government told everyone to wear masks. In fact, the government was telling everyone the opposite, but she was able to rally. So these are the stories of that, you know, empowerment and extraordinary Indigenous people and extraordinary Indigenous women in particular.
Did you have any misgivings before the first time you went out there, up there, about your personal health?
I did go and get checked up for TB. I actually had TB when I was a child, but it's just latent TB. So I went and had it checked, and they said, "Oh yeah, you know, you're too old. Don't worry about it. You're going to die of something else way before you die of TB." So I'm like, "Okay, fine." So
like
you know, I think we take care. I mean, everyone takes care, but I mean, we know more or less who has TB in the community. People are extremely responsible if they have active TB, and it's not everyone. You know, it's a few people in the community. So, no, I was more scared of the cold, to be honest, than my health. And I was also scared of being seen as another white do-gooder arriving in the community, making promises that she couldn't keep.
Yep.
And then flying back home, right?
And flying back home with my nice photographs and my nice stories and telling everybody, and then never going back again and saying, "Oh, you know, it's just too difficult."
So you've developed friendships and neighbors, really?
Yeah,
They just happen to be
absolutely.
4,000 K away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have every week, we have a Zoom call with the community and talk to different community members now. Because of COVID, a lot of our webinars and trainings have gone online. So I see them actually more than I did before. I miss the human contact, but
When do you think you'll be able to go back?
That was my next question.
yeah, I don't know. We were supposed to be there in the first week of May. I think that they should keep the communities closed until next year, until we see what happens with the second wave. As I said before, the consequences of having COVID in the communities could have the potential to be devastating. So I wouldn't think that I will go back till next year.
Thank you for telling us all about this, Rachel.
Must create a yearning in you.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on to Grumpod.
Not at all.
It's a great privilege.
We will encourage
You made two grumps smile.
to visit us. That's SeeChange, SeeChange.org, is it not? Yes.
SeeChange Initiative.
Initiative.org. SeeChangeInitiative.org.
We'll put it up on the podcast.
We'll put the link up for
Put it
sure.
up.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested in the roadmap and want to know more about it, we're doing some webinars and trainings on it for communities who might need to use it.
Duly
Is there
noted.
a link on the website?
And will be linked.
Yeah, great.
Thank you,
Great.
Rachel.
Bye.
Thank you for
I'll
your
see you
time.
later
Talk to
watering
you.
the backyard, Rachel.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And
I'll spray you.
Thank you for everything, Rachel. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Great to meet you, Eva. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Okay. So you and I are just sitting around waiting
waiting
for
for the
the
bus.
garbage guy to come by, and there's Rachel Kiddell-Monroe.
Well, as she said after she did some high power stuff, maybe I'll take it. No, she didn't say that. I would. Of course, I'm going to take it easy after this.
Yeah, I bet I
Talking
was
to
up there more than 20 years ago, and again, we could talk about this for another hour and a half, but
Who are you up there with?
I was up there when I was doing government work at the time, so we're up there in August, and it was, of course, climate change has changed things since, but we were freezing in August up in Iqaluit.
Oh, you can get snow in August in the Iqaluit.
Yeah, when we met some very, very interesting people there, and man, I recall
I'm ashamed.
Well, it's there, but you've got people like Rachel Kiddell-Monroe up there who are working very hard to help people. And there are police forces up there too. And I know we've been talking a lot about police, but I met some RCMP officers out there who were going out of their way, working 7 days a week to work with the kids and And addiction and alcoholism are enormous problems, and they're having to deal with that every single day. And when you're driving down the street or walking down the street and you see a 12-year-old lying in the ditch essentially because he's had too much to drink, you take him back to his family. And I mean, there's stories like that we could tell. We could talk
heartbreaking.
about. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's.
I did a
But it is.
cross-country
But we called it what it is today with Rachel. It is racism. It is an act of violence, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. And I think she conveyed the point quite well, that these people feel pretty much left to their own
Yep.
devices.
Yep.
That's, yeah. I remember I did a cross-country checkup, and this was in because Rachel mentioned Labrador, and there are native communities there, one of them being Nain. And the reason we did it, it was, always when there's a crisis, right? The media's there. Media are there. But there was just this incredible problem of kids sniffing gasoline
Yep.
out of a plastic tank. Kids, we're not talking about
No.
15 or
We're
16,
talking
we're talking
6,
9,
7,
10, and
8,
11.
9-year. Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, out of
Yeah.
plastic containers. It was just awful.
SeeChangeInitiative.org. I'll put the link in, and our thanks again to
Okay.
Rachel. Tomorrow we're going to get somebody who tends to speak out. I think it's Janet Torge tomorrow.
It is
not?
Janet.
Yes, and we're going to
The
get
wild
a
Midwestern girl.
girl from Ohio. I think, right? She's from Akron. I think, as I recall.
Is it
Is
Akron
she
or
not? I think she's from
Columbus?
Akron. We'll find
From
out.
She's from Ohio.
And we're probably going to get a few, a few
We'll have
insights.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, a few insights on what's happening in America.
Yeah, because well, I don't know how much she's doing it now, but she used to go home all the time because she
Yep.
still has a lot of family back in Ohio. So,
So-
she'd drive down to the Midwest. And
So that
Allure.
should be interesting. All right,
Okay.
Adame,
my face is shining like a
It is.
beacon.
it is shining like a national guitar.
We'll see you tomorrow.